Well, amidst the tears and solemnity of Tuesday's opening parliamentary session, Julia Gillard said the government's package to pay for most of Queensland's flood recovery wasn't just a piece of legislation, but an expression of goodwill between Australians. Well, it's not turning out like that so far. The flood levy legislation's been stalled, and the government's trying to exploit disagreement in the opposition over its plan to pay for the damage. Well, the Prime Minister also looks likely to sweep aside Kevin Rudd's health deal with the states at a COAG meeting this weekend. From Canberra, here's our political correspondent Tom Iggulden.
Julia Gillard says flood victims aren't interested in politics right now.
They do not expect to see this parliament degenerate into a rabble around what needs to be done to rebuild the nation.
Nonetheless, something looking a lot like a rabble ensued come question time.
I said this week that the Prime Minister has a decent heart, but I tell you what, she's got a tin ear.
I've never seen such a tin heart. I've never seen such a tin heart.
The opposition says the flood levy shows the government taxes on a whim. Tony Abbott's wondering what else would justify a levy.
Is the government now planning a boats tax to cover the unforeseen additional expenses of border protection?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I have contemplated a tax on three-word slogans, but thought that it would bankrupt the Leader of the Opposition so quickly it would be inappropriate, maybe swear jar style. We should just put one on the table here, and by the end of each question time we could send some dollars to the Queensland Flood Relief Appeal.
When the smoke had cleared from the personal attacks, the opposition had won a small victory. The flood levy legislation's going to a parliamentary committee for investigation, delaying it by weeks. The government may need the extra time. 3 independents still need convincing to back it. One, Tony Windsor, says he wants to cut the baby bonus instead of green programs as proposed by the government. Argument over the flood levy will soon take a back seat to a much more pressing concern for the government, health reform. A key meeting between Julia Gillard and state premiers on Sundays, shaping as a test of her negotiating skills as she sets her sights on ticking off items on the government's reform agenda. The ABC understands the government's prepared to take a knife to the agreement Kevin Rudd hammered out with the states on hospital funding. It's understood the Rudd agreement's seen as too complicated and some states hate it.
I think we're getting there.
The states now won't be expected to give back 30% of their GST revenues, and the federal government will revisit its commitment to put in 60% of state hospital funding. The idea of a combined pool of state and federal funds is still up for grabs, but what stays is the federal government's commitment to inject $16 billion into the state hospital system, presumably in return for gains in areas like extra beds and lower waiting times. The opposition says health reform will fail without the GST deal.
You remember all the talk about the ageing of the population, the fact that this was not a sustainable reform without the financial reforms in place. Julia Gillard is going to walk away completely from the GST reforms, and it just shows that this is a government that has lost its way. But Liberal Western Australia Premier Colin Barnett continues to lead objections over any changes to GST arrangements.
The critical issue for Western Australia is that we talk about health and not about taking away a share of the GST revenues of the states. If the federal government concentrates on health, I believe they can achieve agreement.
Getting the health deal out of intensive care would be a significant win for a government keen to show it can get on with reform. Tom Iggulden, Lateline.